Avengers! Assemble.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Excelsior, the world's #1 Marvel's Avengers podcast. I'm your director, Christian Buckley, as always. Joining me for your episode for May 9th, a special recording day, as always, the Apex legend, Jack Martin.
Excelsior, Christian. Good to be here. We have a very exciting episode today. Perhaps the most, big, meaty episode we've had in quite some time.
Yeah, this is gonna be a chunky one, because there's a lot of things from a lot of different planes of Marvel, from TV to movies to this here Avengers game. But just to catch people up, there was not an episode over the weekend, so you didn't miss anything. We're recording this for our Doctor Strange stuff, and the other headlines we're going to hit this week, normal episode, taking a vacation next week, so we'll be a little bit of an off week again. But after that, show as you expect it. In the meantime, Jack, how have you been? How was your week off? Did some fun things?
Yeah, I've been good. Saw a concert over the weekend, which was very cool. Don't really go to a lot of those these days, so that was nice. Saw the Red Sox. They're doing awfully this season.
Yeah.
It's very painful.
Yeah.
It's not good, but always fun to go to Fenway at the very least. But what about you?
Been doing well, lots of Star Wars stuff going on lately. Popped back into Skywalker Saga in my free time. I've been busy with freelance work. A podcast I had for did a really big celebrity D&D session episode, so that's been all of my time the last week, and I finally finished that, so it feels nice to be free and have free time again. But,
nice. How far are you into Skywalker Saga?
So get this, 14 hours of playtime. I have done the first mission of Attack of the Clones now.
Wow. You go around a lot, messing around with the free roam stuff?
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of that stuff, mainly also trying to complete all the optional level requirements on my first pass through. So counting that as a first run and then a free play run, just to try and get everything I can get. Because I think I might want to platinum this game eventually, but that's going to be a long journey, so I figure do as much as the heavy lifting as I can on my first run,
That is a great call. I after I finished it, I started going back to 100% everything, and very quickly I was like, this is so cumbersome and will take forever, so I'm just not going to do it. So I'm not sure if I'll go back and platinum this. If it is one of those things that you can just go back and chip away at, bit by bit, but man, it's a very lengthy game if you want to do everything for it.
For sure, and that's the case with a lot of LEGO stuff, and this game is just the ultimate LEGO game, because when I first got my PS4, the first platinum I got for it was actually LEGO Marvel Superheroes, which I think is a very fun platinum, but it basically took me an entire summer of just chipping away here and there when I felt like it. Which is still a good game, and if you're a Marvel fan, I recommend picking that up. They got a really cool Manhattan for you to explore, lots of puzzles, full free roam in between an original story set piece with Galactus. It's a cool game, I think, but we got
nice. Yeah, I never checked that out. And as someone who really used to going after platinum trophies, I know that was kind of up there, but yeah, never got around to that one. Maybe they'll make a really good MCU Star Wars or Lego game similar to Lego Skywalker Saga.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But in the meantime, got some interesting things going on with Avengers. No Furies report this week, no Marketplace update, because this is a weird in-between episode. If you wanted to see what was important in the game this week, you could check it out. There's a more relevant, pressing, and maybe exciting or concerning conversation to have about Avengers right now. This broke last week, late last week. Embracer Group, formerly Nordic Games, changed their name to Embracer Group somewhat recently. Embracer Group has acquired Crystal Dynamics, Square Enix Montreal, and Eidos Montreal in a purchase from Square Enix that includes the studios, their owned IP, and roughly 50 back catalog games for $300 million.
What a bargain.
Honestly, God.
That makes no sense to me. Like you'd have to imagine, like they have the Tomb Raider IP at the
Hmm.
very least. If you told me that someone bought the Tomb Raider IP for $300 million, I would believe you.
Yeah,
Like
like
300 million for these studios and their IPs, like you would expect at least $1 billion. I guess not.
yeah, and in the age of acquisitions, right? We got Bungie. That was I think around 4 billion. Uh, that we got Bethesda was like 8 billion, and we got Activision Blizzard right now for 80 billion. 300 million for talented studios, very talented studios. I like several of the games I played from these studios. Uh, and like you said, their IP, nuts. And what's crazier is Square Enix Japan made this sale to invest that 300 million in blockchain tech and like NFT stuff, which like how badly did they want to get rid of these studios, man?
Yeah, and I gotta be honest. When we started this podcast, I don't think I had Square Enix selling off Crystal Dynamics on my bingo card,
Mm-hmm.
and especially like what you alluded to with so many different, maybe not so many, but in recent times, a fair good many publishers being acquired by like bigger companies. I would have just assumed that Square Enix would be gobbled up entirely rather than sort of sectioned off here and there. That was very surprising to me. I'm not really sure like why they did it this way. I'm not a business guy by
Mm-hmm.
any means. I feel like having those studios would make them more like desirable in a way. Like so, I don't know what that means for Square Enix being bought because I'm sure it will at some point. But yeah, it was kind of weird in terms of like the low price tag.
For sure, yeah. And in terms of just the greater question about Square, I'm on the side that I really don't think Square is going to get scooped up anytime soon. They do partnerships like it's nobody's business. Uh, and from all accounts, their Western studios, which are the ones that have been sold, are like just a burden to Square, it feels like, right? Every time it's like, you have a new Tomb Raider game, I guess we'll put it out here, but it better sell like a trillion copies. like it's just this strange relationship that honestly only happened somewhat recently as far as my research did. Like I think remember in the very early 2010s when you and I were like starting to listen to games industry podcasts and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was late PS3. There was this notion that Japanese games had zero appeal. They were worthless. They weren't going to be a success, and it was not the future of the industry. This is when Square Enix made this acquisition, when they were like, okay, we'll get these studios, Western devs, with IP like Tomb Raider, and that'll set us up if our Final Fantasies and Kingdom Hearts and whatever else we put out fail us eventually. So, relatively young business deal being thrown away now to Embracer Group. So, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that was surprising to me as well. I didn't really consider that this has only really been around for a decade or so, which is
Mm-hmm.
relatively small. Um, and honestly, like before we get into what this means for Avengers, I have to say maybe this turns out to be the devil that you know is better than the one you don't. But very happy we don't really have to deal with Square anymore in terms of
Sure.
talking about this game and like the weird decisions and the throwing under the bus of Crystal with this game. So that's exciting to me. I the more I we sort of talked about this game and heard from Square, the more I realized how quickly I did not like Square Enix as a publisher. Mostly how it dealt with this with its Western studios and like the very lofty expectations they had in terms of sales and things like that. Um, it seems like that was kind of mismanaged in a lot of ways in terms of those expectations. So glad we don't really have to talk about them anymore.
For sure. So, from the press release from Embracer Group, they said that this should be closing by September of this year. They did give a little bit of insight that Crystal Dynamics is still going to be working on the Tomb Raider project that was announced that we brought up a couple weeks ago on Unreal 5. And they're also going to be continuing their partnership with Microsoft and Xbox Game Studios through the initiative to work on Perfect Dark. So those deals are still in place. There was a Q&A session with a representative from Embracer Group that did touch on the topic of Avengers. I'm paraphrasing everything I'm going to say here, but the asker of the question was basically like, hey, games like Avengers or licensed games that you have, what's the deal with those moving forward? And the replied something to the effect of, well, a number of approvals have to be made in this process over the next few months. I'd imagine that includes license holders. All games that have been shipped by these studios are now like translating over to us at Embracer Group, and all promised content from games and things we're acquiring are continuing as if nothing's happening. So when we pivot to what does this mean for Avengers, uh, at the very least, we're getting Jane. We're getting Jane Foster. And then there is the question of if Marvel's going to approve the contract to translate, if it's going to be the death of the Avengers or what. But off the rip, Jack, what do you expect is the outcome of this? Do you think that Jane is the last thing we get?
I don't think Jane is the last thing we. I honestly think the game has been going towards a trajectory for a while now, and at the end of the day, I think it'll just continue following that trajectory. I'm not of the opinion that this is going to inject some sort of adrenaline into this game, and all of a sudden, Embracer's going to be like, "Yeah, go full bore into this and like keep working on it." Um, I don't think the audience response has been really positive enough to really justify that. Um, I could be completely wrong, and I hope I am, but I really think at the end of the day, it will just sort of continue and fizzle out before the end of this year. Like, we already haven't been getting similar levels of content that we did last year, which I think, looking back on last year, we did get a decent amount compared to 2020. Or like that was a good start to that sort of rollout, and we've gotten nothing, and it's May. I think that'll sort of continue, and we'll get Jane Foster in the summer, and then maybe we'll get an expansion at the end of the year, but that is pretty lofty expectations. But yeah, I honestly, it's hard to even say whether the approval will go in. I've not really experienced with these types of acquisitions, and considering this is like a third party license that they worked with Marvel to acquire, that's a whole nother thing they have to go through. Um, so that's kind of where my head's at for Marvel's Avengers. What about you?
I'm of two minds right now. I think specifically the wording of like everything that's been promised is still happening. When we look at what's been promised with Avengers, it's just Jane. That's the furthest out thing that we know is promised. I guess if you want to count Cloning Lab,
Oh
and the
God.
Wasteland Patrol that got delayed. So there's those options, right? But I could see a world where the acquisition goes through. Well, it's going to go through, but the license is like, hey, okay, yeah, finish out the content that you've promised to the public. We don't officially know that She-Hulk is coming, right? The writing's on the wall, but there was never a verbal deal with the player base that we're getting that. I could see a world where they ship Jane and maybe one of the pieces of content that got delayed, and that's it. Plug is pulled. I could also see a world where, because Embracer Group is such a large company, like it is stupid how many things they own, uh, they could just dump money into making a dedicated Avengers team if the license translates from Marvel, because they know what they have here. They have one of the most successful IP ever, and they have a structure of a game that's not broken, and the bones are good. So if they could just funnel money into this thing without having to make a whole new game, I could maybe see a world where they want that to be a path forward, right? So I think that one of those two realities just depends on what Marvel wants to do with this. Uh, we'll see, I guess, but the fact that we're still getting some stuff out of Avengers maybe makes me think that Marvel's okay with more things coming out, but maybe they're just looking for an out to stop this game from getting support. Maybe the contract was 5 years of stuff from the license agreement, but if this is a way for them to pull the plug early at Marvel Games, maybe they want that.
I think I'm not as positive that this will really mean all that much for this game. I really hope I'm wrong about that. I'm actually very positive for what this could mean for Guardians though, because that game got such a great critic response. And that was from Eidos Montreal, is that right?
Yes.
Which is one of the studios that was purchased. So I'm not very familiar with Embracer Group, so I don't know like their um, how they really treat their studios. So I could be totally off the mark here, but I think it'd be great if they were like, "Hey, we know that you made a very successful game, and Square said that it didn't meet its expectations, but we know that like that was such a fantastic game in terms of gameplay, writing, and all that. So go ahead and make a sequel." I was a bit more concerned. I think we still would have gotten one from Square Enix, um, but I think a sequel is honestly I have more faith that we'll get a sequel to that game now than under the leadership of Square Enix.
Yeah, and I think the only question there is similar to the Avengers question of like, will Marvel like double down on extending a license to make a sequel, or maybe a sequel was part of the original agreement. Um, so then it's just the question of what in that agreement translates to this new parent company. So, as just a very brief point of comparison, Embracer owns Gearbox, who does Borderlands. They also own Deep Silver. I think they own Volition as well, which does like Saints Row. They own THQ Nordic, which does a lot of stuff with Nickelodeon games. They own the people who make Darksiders. They own Dark Horse Comics as well. Like they own a lot of things.
Mm.
So curious to see what the path forward is, but I think there's certainly more goodwill for an Avengers sequel. Sorry, a Guardians sequel, like you said.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe Marvel wants to hash out a new deal with the Embracer Group for their very long list of studios they have access to. We'll see.
I'm curious how much or how little we hear from. I mean, we've heard practically nothing from Crystal about this game for like it's almost half a year at this point. I wonder what that looks like going forward because this still needs to go through like the regulatory process of like Embracer actually acquiring Crystal and the other devs, and then I would imagine there's a subsequent conversation about Marvel staying on and being involved once Embracer takes over. So I feel like I'm not sure. Like I'm not sure like how the communication would work like that. Like if they have to be quiet, but I don't know. It seems like it's going to be even more quiet than what we've already got.
Yeah, because I think on the other hand, I was going to throw this your way. We got Summer Games Fest coming up, and Square Enix Presents is a label now. That's basically their Nintendo Direct. Are they going to show Jane Foster there? They have no reason to at Square, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, like why waste the time to market that game when it's like it's eventually not even going to be yours.
Yeah, so curious to see the rollout of Jane stuff. Wonder if they probably wouldn't delay Jane, right?
I wouldn't think so. Like I think July is sort of the suspected date, and it would line up with the new Thor movie. So I'm not sure why they'd move that.
Yeah.
They haven't mentioned this at all from any like direct Crystal communications, like online or like with the War Table blog or anything. So maybe like next week they'll actually address it. But I don't know. I'm kind of doubtful of that. It seems like they kind of have to be not like hush hush. Like obviously everyone knows it's a public, um, it's out there in the public, but it seems like they probably can't really speak much to it.
Yeah, I'm double checking Crystal Dynamics' Twitter because I know the Avengers Twitter had nothing to say about it.
Yeah,
So yeah, so Crystal did have something to say about it. All they really said was a new chapter in our story begins as we announce a plan to join the Embracer Group family. Embracer Group will help propel us to great new heights as we continue to deliver exciting experiences from our beloved portfolio of franchises, as well as original concepts and IPs developed with partners. Thank you to our amazing fans. The best is yet to come. The initiative quote tweeted that, and that's when they talked about still continuing work on Perfect Dark. Um,
yeah. But aside from that, I don't think we've gotten really any.
Nothing for Avengers specifically
Yeah,
now.
yeah. I remember. I think was it? Yeah, it was the Embracer Group. Which, by the way, that's got to be the most generic name for
It
any.
sounds scary.
it sounds like it sounds like completely made up, but um, the press release, I did a control F of that press release, and Marvel or Avengers is not listed in that, which I guess makes sense because they're unsure about the continuation of it, like with the licensing and all. But it was just a little sad to see.
Sure. I think the other thing, the reason that I have I'm talking like maybe there's a 10% chance this happens, right? Embracer Group, if you look at the IP they own, which I don't have a full list for reference, but based off the studios I talked about, they got like Borderlands, SpongeBob, and like Saints Row, uh, and Darksiders. None of that is on the level of Avengers, you know?
No.
So if they are able to translate that and have a lot of resources, like it would make sense for this super big company that wants to grow larger to take advantage of what they're getting out of this, right? Like that logic tracks to a certain degree.
If this means a new game rather than like I've always been championing a new like a sequel to this game.
Mm-hmm.
If this means that, then I would be very happy because I think if they had a new chance for Crystal to start over and hopefully make the game that they want to make, like we're not really sure about the behind the scenes, but it really seems like Square Enix had like its hands in terms of the the bones of like the like online multiplayer sort of thing. Like if Crystal is able to make the game they want under Embracer and just kind of start fresh, that would be very exciting to me.
For sure. I think in this scenario, I see in my head, I see them doubling down on the service stuff. Like, we can do it better. We have Gearbox. They do Borderlands. Like, that's the path I'm envisioning. But yeah, I think it would be awesome if they could just make another kick-ass single-player campaign. That'd be great.
Yeah, or like I would agree. Like I would imagine they would make a servicey type game, but if it's on the level more similar to like Destiny, where you actually have a reason to play with your friends, where I really don't feel like that's present in this game, or just like better direction in terms of more regular content drops, I think that would be fantastic. So it's really hard to say even what happens with this right now. It's so new and it's ongoing at the moment, so we can really only speculate.
Yep, and like you said, we're probably not going to hear about it for quite a while, even with the what was formerly E3 season coming up. So keep an ear to the ground. We'll talk about it as new developments happen. But meanwhile, a few things to shout out before we get to the first course. Second course? That was an appetizer.
Yeah, that was. We got like 2 orders of mozzarella sticks just now.
Yeah, and this is the salad.
Yeah, you're right. That's a great call.
Scarlet Witch is in the Fortnite shop right now. $15. They also have a bundle with like a back bling and a pickaxe or something, and some emotes. But good looking skin, synergy. Fortnite loves Marvel. Marvel loves Fortnite. You see the skin?
I think I might have. What's the pickaxe for this? I'm curious.
That's a good question. It might be so. Fortnite started introducing like character themed pickaxes, right? Like I have a Tron skin and the pickaxe is just the disc.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
maybe it might just be like a magic construct that Wanda would use.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
So yeah, that is in the shop currently. By the time that this following episode is out, I imagine it will be gone. But it's still there right now, as well as Doctor Strange in the Battle Pass. That's wrapping up in a couple weeks. So would love another Marvel season, dude.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Um, I still haven't tried the no build mode. I'm very wary of these types of games because I was like straight up addicted to Apex Legends, and I can
Sure.
totally see myself doing that for Fortnite, especially with all the cool stuff they have. So, trying to avoid it.
For sure. I have an ungodly amount of hours in it because it's the way I keep in touch with my friends from growing up, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, yeah, I'll play for like 3 hours, like 2 nights a week, sure. So, been doing that since like 2018. I do not want to tell you how many hours I have in this game, but uh, yeah, quality stuff. Love to see the Marvel stuff keep coming. I am sure we'll get another thing soon, but we also have an anniversary to celebrate. On May 4th, wow, that was funny. I didn't realize that. May the 4th be with you. Not Marvel's Avengers, dear Christ. Avengers 2012. It has turned 10 years old.
That's wild. I was a freshman in high school.
Yeah, I think I was finishing middle school the year that came out.
What was your theater experience with this? Like, did you see it opening weekend?
That would, yeah, I saw it that Friday, I think. Or maybe, yeah, I think I saw it the Friday, not the Thursday. Because this was before theaters were doing like the just literally see it anytime on Thursday before it's
Yeah.
actually out. I think it was still midnight around then because I did see the midnight for Dark Knight Rises that year. But uh, yeah, Avengers theater experience was great. It was a very loud for the time, right? Like lots of laughter, like very, very active theater, packed theater. I think I went twice opening weekend. Incredible experience. I'm so glad I was there for the first day showing of it. But what about you? Do you have any fun memories of Avengers 1?
I have a very boring Avengers story. I went with a couple of my friends, who they enjoyed like superhero movies, but I don't think they were really, and they aren't nowadays like really into those types of movies. But back then we were all in high school, so like it was just kind of standard to go to those movies. So we went. I think we were coming off of the high of like some of the Nolan movies, like specifically Dark Knight. I don't think Rises had come out at that point. Um, but we all sort of walked out of it and was like, that was fine. Like, I think we were thinking that people like hyped it up a little too much, and we were like, it
Fair.
was good, but like wasn't amazing. So that's never really been a movie that I loved. I do appreciate it, but yeah, even like seeing it in theaters, I was like, yeah, that was good. I think I, I think it was like the high school sort of like, oh, people are excited about this. I'm gonna not be excited about this. Definitely sort of that vibe to my reaction at that time. But yeah, I thought it was good at the time. I didn't get the hype, or maybe I was actively trying to disassociate myself from the hype.
Sure. I was embracing it fully. Every time like a couple of my friends the following week were like, I haven't seen it yet. I was like, oh, do you want to go? I'll see it again. So like that was basically my time with Avengers. I think I saw it 3 times in theaters, maybe four, but now love the nostalgia, you know?
Yeah.
That's
Oh
the
yeah.
best thing I can say about that film now.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't the MCU didn't really click for me like in terms of me being like a capital F fan until the lead up to Infinity War, where I like rewatched everything. And I'd seen pretty much everything except for Ant-Man and Doctor Strange in theaters. So like I passively enjoyed the MCU, but it really wasn't until like that lead up watch through week by week for Infinity War where I was like, oh, I love the MCU. And then doing that again for Endgame sort of cemented that.
Man, can you imagine doing a week by week MCU rewatch again because new stuff would be coming out no matter when you try to do it.
Yeah, no, I feel like that would kind of lose its luster, especially
Yeah.
now where everything's like so chaotic, like what you mentioned, with like so much coming out.
Yeah. Well, shout out to Avengers, another movie that is going to be turning 10 very soon, Guardians of the Galaxy,
Mm.
which is even wilder to think. But Volume 3 has wrapped filming. James Gunn posted a Twitter thread, very emotional, very clear. This man loves the Guardians. He talks about how much he puts into all of them from himself. So I'm expecting this is going to be a train wreck of an emotional place for me when I sit down in this theater next year. But of course, it's going to be great. So, any thoughts on the wrapping of Guardians 3?
Very bittersweet. I think you're right in terms of that. The emotions will be running high for sure, and I think he's one of those directors, and we'll talk about it more with Sam Raimi and Multiverse. But he's one of those directors where like his influence really shines through in the MCU, which I think is becoming more common these days. But he's kind of one of the first directors to really take off in terms of, oh, this is definitely a James Gunn movie within the MCU. So having that trilogy together is going to feel probably very consistent, and it's going to be very sad. I assume he's not going to be working in the MCU anymore after this. He could be, but in terms of like his work on the Guardians, yeah, that'll be very sad.
For sure, yeah. I know it seems like he's left the door open for future stuff, but he's been very like vocal that between the holiday special and Volume 3, this is like it for him and the Guardians of the Galaxy. Uh, like you said, bittersweet. Glad that we're at least getting this out of it because of just a couple years ago, we thought Guardians 3 would not happen or it would be a Taika Waititi film. So, yeah, very glad that James Gunn's getting to close out what will probably end up being my favorite trilogy, honestly, because I love
Yeah,
1 and 2 so much.
yeah,
So,
definitely. I'm interested to see that once it finally comes out to look back on some of the trilogies. I think Spider-Man definitely makes a great
mm,
case, so
mhm.
we'll see.
Yeah, and we won't have to wait too much longer because the film will be releasing in a year from this month. So, we'll look forward to it.
That's wild. It's so funny, like you mentioned him being fired from Disney. Like that feels like ages ago at this point, but it's relatively recent, and for him to bounce back and kill it at DC and come back and leave a stamp on the MCU with this, pretty fantastic.
For sure. Let's move on to the first piece of viewing material we'll be discussing for this episode. Last week, we got the finale, episode 6 of Moon Knight. So, initial thoughts on the finale, Jack, spoiler free, and then initial thoughts on the season as a whole, spoiler free, and then we'll get in the weeds.
Okay, so initial thought on the finale. It's a Disney Plus finale, like we all expected it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I think it was fine, like going in with the expectation, knowing it was going to be exactly what we thought it was going to be, and just seeing that happen. I wasn't surprised by any means by anything that happened in the show. I thought they handled something that was sort of lingering in the background of the plot pretty well. I enjoyed seeing that at the end of the show, but yeah, it was fairly standard in terms of finales, how finales go for MCU Disney Plus shows. So nothing too groundbreaking by any means, but I thought it wrapped up the show like relatively nicely. And overall, I think the show was mostly good. I think Doctor Strange sort of spoiled the quality of the show because I think that movie has a lot of style, and this show doesn't really have much at all. I kind of feel that way about a few of the Disney Plus shows. It feels just kind of a standard, generic jaunt in the MCU. No sort of real style sort of bleeds through this show. I thought it was mostly fun, kind of standard. I really can't even name the villain at this point. So that's kind of how I feel about that. But yeah, it's kind of a middling MCU project for me. I'm excited about the future of the character, but it's a show I might revisit like once or twice. But yeah, what about you?
Yeah, so for the finale, I thought it had some really great moments. Um, like you, I went into this expecting it to be exactly what it was going to be, and it was. But I do think that the highs of it were really great. I think that they, like you, wrapped up the show pretty well, and I'm excited to see what's next for the whole cast of characters for Moon Knight. But yeah, in terms of the show overall, I trying to divorce it from like its like success or shortcomings as a television show and looking at it as an MCU origin story. I think it's a solid origin story. The way that a lot of the origin story films have aged for me, where I think it's a great introduction to the character. I feel like I fully understand this character at this point. I like this character, and I'm looking forward to following their journey as we go on. So, yeah, I think it's good. I will probably revisit this show because I really love Oscar Isaac's performance in it, and I think some of the set pieces are fun. But yeah, in terms of MCU Origins, I think it's like one of the better ones, but being extended across a whole show introduces some shortcomings for me. So,
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I feel like the idea and the concept of Mark Spector, Stephen Grant, and Moon Knight is really interesting, and they handled it mostly well. But I don't know. I feel like the like tone of this show was just dark, but they didn't even nail that like as much as they could have really. Um, so that's sort of kind of it didn't live up to I think the potential of a Moon Knight project could. Like I feel like if someone took the reins of Moon Knight as a movie, and like we were talking about like James Gunn or Sam Raimi or someone like that, like who really has a defined direction to their movies and
mhm.
like took on Moon Knight, I feel like that could be a really interesting project. So I kind of hope Moon Knight gets his own movie. I didn't really love the show as much as I think I could have.
Sure. And to just throw this out there also, I only think a handful of character origin films are excellent in the
Sure.
MCU.
Yeah.
Uh, of those, like Guardians of the Galaxy, Shang-Chi, and Captain America 1, and kind of Doctor Strange. Because I like Doctor Strange a lot. Those are the only ones that I think are really great to excellent origin films. Black Panther I don't count because he was introduced in Civil War, same as Spider Man. So those initial movies don't count in my statement there. But
Hmm.
yeah, let's crack into the finale a little more then. What were your highlights? Because I think it sounds like you agree with me that some of the moments of the finale were really strong. So I want to hear some of those examples.
Yes, I really liked the when Steven and Mark basically got like both hands on the wheel of
Yeah.
Moon Knight and they got to switch back and forth on the fly. I think that's really cool. And knowing that that's going to continue going forward has me really excited. But like the in terms of like the action sequences of them switching back and forth, I thought that was very interesting. And also seeing Layla as the Scarlet Scarab, I believe
Mm-hmm.
her name is, was cool. I think her outfit is fantastic. Um, that was, I think, probably the highlight. Like I thought the action was mostly pretty cool in this. I knew that we were gonna see Moon Knight and I'm forgetting the villain's name.
Harrow.
Harrow fight at the same time where Khonshu and the alligator goddess that I'm forgetting would fight at the same time. Like that was very predictable, and it happened because that's how Disney Plus shows wrap up. But hey, that's just kind of standard at this point. But I did like the action for the most part. I think that was probably the highlight for me.
Yeah, as telegraphed as it was, I did think it was cool to see a giant dead bird fight a giant alligator by the Pyramid of Giza, right? Like that was
Hmm.
fun, at least. But for sure, I think the highlight is absolutely when it comes to the character moments in the episode. Like, I really have loved Layla this season, and seeing her step up that way was awesome. Um, I'm with you. The unification of Mark and Steven was a great payoff for their relationship of the season. I like that before the episode ended, also, we did get another tease of third personality after they were able to sort of come to terms with each other, right? Like, specifically that fight scene in like the parking lot where they both black out and Layla looks like terrified of like what did you just do? Um, I thought that was fun because we do get a resolution to that in the post credits. But yeah, I'm with you. I think the action was good. Really liked the way they used Moon Knight as Mark and Steven in this episode.
Yeah, and I know, like practically the blackout scene happens as like sort of a Deus Ex Machina, like, oh, how do they get out of this situation? And
Mhm.
it just kind of happens. But I agree with you. I love that coming back from the first and third episode. I believe those that was present, that sort of mechanic. It was really like very interesting to see Mark in this situation, blackout, wake up, and I believe Hera was dead at that point and was only revived later with the alligator god, who I'm forgetting the name of. Um, was he blacked out, or like was he knocked out from Mark, or was he dead and then later revived?
I
That
think
was
he was
my
knocked
impression.
out.
Oh, okay. I I thought that would have been really interesting to be like, oh yeah, dead, problem solved, and it's like, wow, that's quite the turn.
Yeah, maybe I misinterpreted it, but I think he was knocked out. But yeah, I think a credit to the show, something you're saying that I only slightly disagree with about like the style of it. I do think Moon Knight made some choices that I really like in terms of the way they present uh, Mark and Steven's DID, right? And using that with the blackouts and robbing us the experience the way that he doesn't understand what's happening either. I think that was like a bold choice they made at episode one, and to see it continue through to the finale, I really appreciated. Um, Even if some of the action throughout the season was kind of middling, I think that choice and a lot of the visual and music choices they made throughout the season do help to give it its own identity because we haven't really seen uh, this region of the world explored in the MCU. So I do think that came across. But in terms of the MCU ness of it, I'm with you that it does feel pretty par for the course. So
Yeah, and how did you feel about the third personality finally coming out?
I liked it because I did have that suspicion that Conchi would never give up the body, right? Uh, so the fact that he has his loophole and Mark and Steven are none the wiser, I think is fun. Um, and the way it's revealed in the post credit scene, I did like that Conchu, it seems like his favorite personality is Jake, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're both no holds barred, essentially. But what did you feel about it?
I agree. I really liked it. I'm glad. Like Jake showed up. We didn't see him show up. Like the audience or Mark or Steven didn't in that episode, and I'm glad it wasn't just like a sort of trump card at the end. Like, oh, what about this guy? He just sort of shows up as he is always showed up in the show, and we don't see him. And like he didn't like deal with it at the end. Like I mentioned Deus Ex Machina, but like it wasn't him to like sort of end it all. Um, in that particular instance, like Mark and Steven still have the choice to spare Harrow at the end of the day, which I
Mm.
appreciated. And I really liked, like you mentioned, the loophole of Conchu being like, all right, yeah, you guys are free to go. Them obviously being none the wiser to the fact that Conchu still has uh, control over Jake. And I thought that was really cool. I'm glad they introduced him in that way. And I honestly think I would assume that we're going to see Moon Knight again. And I think having that at the end as the end credit is a really interesting way to leave off the show. And I want to see how they handle that going forward.
Yeah, I think it's my favorite post-credit scene that we're going to be talking about this episode
Yeah, I agree.
because it leaves you with a question, but it gives you an answer. You know.
Exactly.
So yeah, super excited to see the future of Moon Knight. I think the big takeaway is that Oscar Isaac killed it. I think might be one of my favorite performances I've seen in the MCU. Like I really think he flexed with all the characters he had to play and the emotion he got out of all of them, especially playing off each other. Uh, I think it's a, if anything, really great showcase of acting for an MCU project.
Yeah, totally. I think that was definitely the highlight. Some other good stuff in here and some other sort of bland MCU traditional stuff. But yeah, all in all, pretty good show.
Do you have it ranked currently, either in the greater MCU or against the shows?
Yes, I have both.
Ooh, okay.
And I have my letterbox score. I give it a 3. That is, by my definition, a lowercase g good. Had some fun with this, but didn't really like blow my mind or anything. But I thought it was good. I think I'll do the Disney Plus ranking because I think that sort of means more these days.
Sure.
Number 6 is What If. There's 6 shows, right?
Yes.
I'll see if I miss anything. 6 is What If. 5 is Hawkeye. 4 is Moon Knight. 3 is Falcon. 2 is Loki, and 1 is WandaVision. And then for my MCU list, which is very long these days,
Yeah.
I put Moon Knight at 23, above Captain Marvel, below Avengers: Age of Ultron.
Nice. So I gave it 4 stars. I had it at 3.5 at the beginning of the finale, but then I really liked the way they wrapped things up, so I bumped it up a little bit. In terms of the shows, I have What If, then Hawkeye, then Falcon, then Loki. I've had some fading thoughts about Loki as we've gotten away from it. Uh, then Moon Knight, and then WandaVision, and that is 6, correct?
Yeah. Oh, so that's pretty high for you. That's good.
Yeah, just because I feel like I felt similar to it with Falcon for a lot of the show, and then when we got the finale, I was like, I might like it a bit more than Loki. So I did bump it up because I feel like Moon Knight has some more interesting choices that were made in it, where Loki is maybe more consistent, but I think kind of safe in a lot of ways.
Sure.
And in terms of numbered ranking, I have it at 18, above Eternals and below Ant-Man.
Cool.
So that's Moon Knight. Do you think season 2 gets announced this year?
I hope season 2 doesn't get announced because I hope Moon Knight gets. I think. I hope all these, not maybe all, but some of these shows get like launched into a movie. Like.
What's happened twice already, right?
Yeah, like Captain America's getting his own movie after the show. Who else am I thinking of?
I'm counting WandaVision to Multiverse of Madness.
Right. Yeah.
But it's
Okay.
probably a better example.
Yeah, and then I would honestly hope that like they start out a lot of these characters on Disney Plus and then transition them over to the movies. I'm kind of over the Disney Plus shows at this point. Like they're very hit or miss for me. A lot of them have been kind of misses for me. So kind of all on board with MCU movies.
Yeah, I think conceptually, and this is a good lead into multiverse, I think, I like the idea of the MCU embracing more replicating the structure of comics, but I think they need a bit more refinement to get to where that could be a really great rhythm, you know, where Avengers movies, think of those as the big event comics like Civil War or what's another event comic we read? There must have been one, right?
From back in the day, we did both Civil Wars, I think.
Sure. So think of the Avengers movies and a movie like Multiverse of Madness as like the big events that Marvel announces when they do their year preview for their comics, and treat the shows more like, hey, this is the 6 issues of Moon Knight this year, and then he'll pop up somewhere else. Like, I think there's something to that works for comic book movies, and I think Multiverse of Madness, as we'll get to, seems like it's more leaning into embracing comic books more than like MCU structure. Uh, so I think there's room still, but so far it feels like we're still in that replicating the MCU structure on a TV setup instead of embracing a TV setup with the quality of the MCU, and then movies can be big crossover things or fun character appearances.
Sure. Yeah, I'm waiting for shows to be more similar to WandaVision or even Loki. Even like Falcon, I think used uh, maybe not to the best as those shows, but I think those shows all sort of use the TV format very well. And some of the other Disney Plus shows just felt like extended movies. So I hope they nail that eventually.
Yeah, so I'd like them to keep trying, but for the time being, I'm with you. I think it's very middling. I think the highest show I have is WandaVision, and that's at like number 10 for me. So
Yeah.
with that being said, Multiverse of Madness time. A few stats before we get to spoiler-free thoughts, and then crack it open. $450 million global opening weekend. It is the second biggest May domestic opening ever. I think it made 185 million domestically. It is the 11th largest domestic opening of all time, and within the MCU, the third highest solo film opening weekend, just trailing behind Black Panther at 202 million and Spider-Man No Way Home at 260 million. So big box office for this one.
Yeah, doing very well. I wonder. I kind of think this will probably do the best this summer in terms of like any of the other summer blockbusters, because I think expectations were very high for this movie. In terms of like audience expectations of like the plot. So I think that has a lot to do with these numbers that we're seeing right now.
I could maybe see it get toppled by Thor. Like, there's a chance, because so many people turned around on the character with Ragnarok, and we've known Thor a lot longer, right? And I feel like more people like Thor than Doctor Strange. So I think that if anything has a shot, it's probably Thor. But
No, I think you're right. I'm not thinking that Jurassic World Dominion's gonna come close to this one.
hey, Jurassic World 1 like broke the bank, did it not?
Yeah, I think so. I think the most recent one was not well received by audiences.
Yeah.
So I think that might have some. I really actually liked the first Jurassic World.
I do too, dude. I really like that movie a lot.
Yeah. The second one, I honestly forget the title of the second one, but it was not good. It was very much not good.
I loved the last like 25 minutes because it was like a Resident Evil film kind of, just with dinosaurs in a mansion, so that was fun. But
Yeah.
not the biggest success story. But spoiler free thoughts, Jack. General impressions, Multiverse of Madness. Should people see it? Yes, no. What's your endorsement?
Yes, you should see this movie. I'm surprised at how much I really, really enjoy this movie. I think it's great. I think it was really a fun time at the movie theater. And I honestly think it feels pretty unique within the MCU, which is always very refreshing. We're always, like we just talked about, Moon Knight kind of feeling like standard Marvel fare, and this is very different. And it's, again, very refreshing, and I love Sam Raimi's direction in this movie, and I think it shines through, even within following the MCU template. So, yeah, this is a movie I came out of instantly being like, man, I want to see that again. So, trying to make plans to see it again at some point in the next couple of weeks. But, yeah, I think it's great. I think a lot of people have mentioned it's very messy, which it is, but it's fun. It's a great movie. What about you?
I absolutely loved it. I think you should see it, but maybe have in the back of your mind the idea that you might not like it, because I think this is the most divisive MCU movie that's ever been released to my memory.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of mixed reactions to this.
Yeah, I see people loving it. I see people hating it. I see people all over the board on this one. I, like you, fall into the camp of really enjoying it to the point where I think it makes a lot of the MCU look weaker by comparison because of just how much they go for it and how much of it works for me. So, spoiler free, there you go. Let's crack into this thing.
Um, I don't even know where to begin. I just gotta say, maybe our biggest concern is where we should start with.
Sure.
I'm very glad they were conservative in that regard. Like, I was going in with the expectation that this was just going to be a big cameo fest.
Mm-hmm.
And they end up going to like 3 different universes, all in all. Like, actually, like spending time. Maybe it was two or three. Um, and the Illuminati were really the only cameos in this movie, and I think the way that they only had a few made them more meaningful and impactful, rather than, hey, let's get Chris Evans to do Johnny Blaze or whatever his name is. Um, or like, and I thought we were going to get a ton of 2000s Marvel movie references. And that was not the case. So that I felt very relieved walking out of the theater being like, thank God.
Nothing has made me happier than being wrong because I was also expecting this to be a cameo fest worse than No Way Home. I think it even handled the cameos less egregiously than No Way Home. Not that it was egregious in No Way Home, but that was a big pillar of that movie.
Yeah. Well, like, yeah, I'm glad they weren't egregious in this, but to your point of No Way Home, like, there were direct, um, like, I'm something of a scientist myself. Like, that's a reference to the meme and,
Yeah.
like, not the actual line of dialogue. Or Tobey Maguire saying you're amazing, or, like, making references to, like, cracking the back. Like, that's all sort of fan service, and it works, but it's very much on the nose in a way that this movie doesn't handle its cameos in that way. Like, it feels very much like in the universe, and it feels like it makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to like talk down to No Way Home because I love that movie and I think
Right.
despite the cameos, it still tells a meaningful story with Peter. I just think uh they don't need the cameos in this movie to tell a compelling story about Steven or Wanda or America or anything really. I was overjoyed that the Illuminati had like 8 minutes of screen time and they all got murdered. I was so happy by that.
Yeah, and our friend Mike texted us saying that there was a very much like Invincible vibe to it, and that was my impression. Like watching that too, like wow, I can't believe that they're going for this, and it was very violent, like more so than most MCU movies. Like they kind of went there with the violence, which I appreciated.
Yeah, and I've seen some people being like, "How is this not rated R?" And to that, I'd be like, "Watch more movies, please." But it was pushing the boundary for sure within the MCU. We never have
Yes.
seen anything in the MCU that's like this.
No, like for example, when they were dealing with like the alien squid monster at the beginning,
Hmm.
and you could see Strange like reaching for the like light post or whatever, and you were like, you had the thought like, oh, he's gonna stab him with it, but we're not gonna like see anything like too graphic. And then like the eyeball comes out, and it's the Neversoft logo from the early 2000s. It's like,
Uh,
whoa, that's sweet.
yeah, they do a lot of very creative stuff with the violence in this because it should be said now, this is essentially a horror movie and not like a Paranormal Activity or Friday the 13th like remake sort of thing or Saw. Like it's absolutely Evil Dead horror. It is Scream, uh, like the campy Nightmare on Elm Street level of this is gruesome, but in a very entertaining, fun way. It does have jump scares, but I think it does harken back to Raimi's Evil Dead stuff. And I think the best comparison is we all know the scene in Spider Man 2 that Raimi did where it's very much inspired by horror stuff of Doc Ock getting the tentacles removed. If imagine they did a whole movie of that, that's this, you know.
I'll say like it has scary elements to it, but I wouldn't say this is like a scary movie.
Yeah, for
It's like
sure.
visually disturbing in a lot of ways, in like great horror-esque ways, but
It's
like
like
we're
Halloween horror.
yeah, exactly, yeah. We're not quite there where like this is a scary movie in the MCU, um, but it is a little more visually disturbing than most movies in the MCU, which I think is fantastic. Like this is one of those unique movies where it's like, oh, we're getting one of these types of movies in the MCU. Like there's different genre movies that we've gotten so far in the
Hmm.
MCU, and this is definitely one of those in like the, I guess, lowercase h horror realm, which is cool.
Yeah, and you can definitely feel Sam Raimi's fingerprints all over this, like you alluded to before with the James Gunn discussion, right? Like even beyond the horror influence and like the homages to his other stuff that he's done in that genre. Uh, think back to Spider-Man 1, the like the picture
Crash
in picture
zooms.
stuff, the zooms, the um just the like Wanda's eyes over her meditating, you know, like stuff like that. That was very Sam Raimi and I love that.
The the like blunderbuss moment with Christine
Oh,
and
I
her
love
like
that.
her one liner, "Go back to hell." Like very
Love that.
cheesy, but that worked for me because I was like, yeah, they fucking let him do it. I can't believe it.
Yeah. So I loved all of that. And I think moving forward, that's my hope for MCU stuff. I really hope they bring in directors that can flex their style, uh, because when it comes to James Gunn, you can definitely feel the James Gunness in the Guardians, but having seen some of his other stuff and even within the superhero genre, I think the Guardians is James Gunn on a leash, and I think that's a kind of a benefit to the films because I don't love Suicide Squad, um, and even some other stuff I've seen from Taika, like it feels like Taika Waititi made an MCU movie, James Gunn made an MCU movie. To me, this comes across as like Sam Raimi made a Sam Raimi movie with MCU elements in it, and I think that is something I'd like to see other directors strive for.
Yeah, and it seems like that's sort of the trajectory the MCU is on at this point. Like with the Eternals director, whom I'm
Yes, Chloe
forgetting,
Zhao.
Chloe Zhao, and like what we already said, James Gunn, and now Sam Raimi's here with this movie. Um, Potentially, we're getting Jim Halpert direct Fantastic Four, forgetting his name, who did A Quiet Place. But like it seems like they're at this point like letting big name directors come in and sort of like what you said, sort of flex their stuff and let them have their defined style, and hopefully that'll lead to more unique and interesting movies working within the MCU framework.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because we're obviously like James Gunn and Taika are examples of bringing a director's flair. I think the most clear examples we've seen so far are Eternals and Multiverse, and I don't think it's that surprising that those are the two most controversial Marvel movies that we've had in a long time.
Yeah, I do think there are elements of those movies aside from the style of them that detract from the movie, and I understand. Like, I don't like Eternals, and it doesn't. It has nothing to do with the real style of the movie.
Sure.
It's like very plot elements and
Hmm.
being overstuffed and things like that. And I know a lot of people have issues with some of the plot elements in this movie. We'll get into it with Wanda, which I don't personally agree with all the way, but I understand people's points. But I do think there's that element as well. But you're right. It is interesting that some of the more unique movies are not as widely critically accepted as some of the other MC movies we've gotten.
Yeah. So I guess how do you feel about the pacing of this? Because when we jump in, it's already going at 100 miles per hour, and I don't think it really lets up much. But
Yeah,
for me, it
I
works.
oh yeah, I love when they work. I really enjoy very quickly paced movies.
Hmm.
I really like the first act of Rise of Skywalker,
Yeah.
which is going at 1,000 miles an hour, which I enjoy. But
Hmm.
Yeah, you're right. It does start off very quickly, and by the end of the movie, I was like, oh, this movie's over. It goes by very quickly, and I think the pacing of this movie is definitely one of the strong suits of what we get with this movie. Like it feels very quick, and it still leaves you pretty satisfied. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It moved very quickly.
Yeah, and I think a strength of it that helps with the pacing, right, is there's really no B plot. There's like the main plot that we're driving forward about protecting America, the character, not the country.
There's a
Um,
few points in this movie where they'll say something about America, and I'm like, are they making like an allusion to the country?
um, but like that's really the main driving force of the movie. Um, but I think what gives it like depth and nuance beyond that is the way that all of our three main characters are so strongly tied to that A plot and the theme of just like accepting new perspectives. So for that, I'm completely fine that it's pretty straightforward, because I think what is done with character here is exceptional in my opinion. So
Do you want to get into Wanda?
sure, let's start with Wanda because many people said she stole the movie. I think they're probably correct.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I it seems like we agree on Wanda though, so I'll start with the point of contention that I've seen is that it retcons WandaVision, and her character arc in that show. It feels like she doesn't have agency. I've seen some people say it's misogynist of what her character is in this film, uh, which, funny enough, the most people that I've seen say that are men that feel like they don't understand how you can write women. Uh, and it just seems like people are not on board with the idea that Wanda's a villain. And I kind of disagree with all of that.
I think the points I saw online that I understand was that we're kind of like retreading some of her plot elements from
Mm-hmm.
WandaVision. Um, like she kind of went through everything she did in that show dealing with Vision, and now she's kind of doing the same dealing with her children,
Mm-hmm.
which I understand. That didn't really hit me when I was watching the movie, and it felt consistent with where we left off with WandaVision, with her like combing through the multiverse, like trying to, or combing through the Darkhold, like trying to connect with her children at some point in the multiverse. So like I was kind of on board with that, and I thought of this, and go with me here because it sounds ridiculous, but it kind of reminded me of the Emperor returning in the Rise of Skywalker, because at the very beginning of both of these movies, you're either like with that and like you're just on board, or you're completely against it. Obviously, it's ridiculous in the Rise of Skywalker that the Emperor comes back, but um, I think for this movie, like it is sort of one of those things for a lot of people to be like, oh, she's really like gone and like become the villain in this. It definitely worked for me. Um, but there were some complaints I saw of people saying like we're kind of treading the same water we already did in WandaVision.
Yeah, in terms of the repeating a previous arc sort of thing, I kind of really disagree with it, right? Because if you look at WandaVision, in the title, it's about Wanda grieving Vision, you know? Like the kids don't even come into picture until like halfway through that show. And where we leave off with Wanda, like she tucks the kids in, she's like, okay, that was just a fabrication. And then the final moments of her and processing all the trauma she's dealt with in that show is letting go of Vision, which I think makes sense why he doesn't show up in any of the stuff here. Uh, but we never really got to see her process losing the children. And beyond that, before she gives them up, she learns about who she is. She's the Scarlet Witch. She has immense power. She's very easily and instantly able to overthrow Agatha, who's a very old witch, learning rune magic almost instantly, realizing who she is. And I think they set her up in a way with like a chosen one complex of like, I can't fail. leading to the very end of WandaVision, where she takes the Darkhold, this very evil book she was told about by Agatha, and is looking for her kids, right? Like that tracks to me to the point where when we see her in this, it's very clearly she has two hands on the wheel and she's making these choices. The logic follows for her. She knows her kids exist somewhere else, so she wants to get there because she feels she can. So, like on a grand scheme, I can see how there would be similarities, but I think when you really like look at her character arc, it is moving forward still. It's not really regressing or repeating that significantly.
Yeah, no, I think I really enjoy where her character goes in this. It's great to see her be just like full Scarlet Witch,
Mhm.
which is fantastic. I like the idea of her being corrupted by the Darkhold, and just sort of like I'm trying to equate it to something like basically letting her personality be more than like what it already is. Like she was when we saw her at the end of WandaVision, interested in combing through the multiverse for her kids. And you can see like her doing that enough has corrupted her. Like she unveils the reality of like where she is physically, and like it's all like scorched earth because it's like extracting that toll for her to use it. So I thought that was really interesting. I think the biggest bummer for me is where we leave off with her. I think like the movie presumes she's dead. I don't expect her to be dead. Like
She's
we're
not.
definitely no, like we're gonna see her again. I just don't. I don't think they handle that very well. Of just being like, oh yeah, she's dead now. It's like I don't believe that, and I don't buy it. It just, I think visually it was a little silly to me. Like I feel like they could have had her part from these characters in a better way than just, oh, no one can use this. I have to destroy myself. Like, or just allude more to the fact that this was an illusion. And like I know that sounds like it might be a little like on the nose, but
Mhm.
it just it was funny because I watched out the movie and some kid like held the door for me and he was like, "Did you see the movie?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "I can't believe they did that to Wanda." I was like, "I know. Like, I assume we're gonna see her again, but it just felt a little strange. Like, I guess visually the way they dealt with it."
Yeah, because like the group I saw it with were like, "Oh, there's no way she's dead," and I was like, "You're right," but they also like gave her like angelic lighting as she sacrificed herself, you know. So I was like, it's very unceremonious, but I think it's very clear that they're not done with her story. Um, I will say though, I did love the way we had resolution for her as a villain in this film. Um, America using her power to make Wanda face herself and like realize how far she's strayed from who she is. Because I think the movie's pretty clear that Wanda isn't a bad person. She just made a lot of really bad choices. And the comparison I've seen it done most in the past week is Anakin Skywalker, where Anakin, similar to Wanda, was influenced by a dark force, but he still made all those evil choices on his own and can still be redeemed down the line for sure. It's just it's like it's a character justifying their actions in a way that I feel like most MCU villains don't get enough time or nuance to make it make the most sense.
Sure. Yeah. No. I think they handle her as a villain very well because like we already have her backstory and like we have that sympathy for her.
Mhm.
Um, So for the most part, you can really only sympathize with her. Obviously, she does some pretty heinous things. So I'm interested to see like going forward how they square that. She straight up kills people that we're supposed to root for as
Mhm.
the heroes in like very malicious ways. So um, interested to see that going forward. And yeah, I think just for me, like her ending or the movie like treating her end as a death, which obviously we don't buy, but it was sad because I feel like we just got the start of Wanda as like a bigger presence in the MCU, and I loved WandaVision so much. So just leaving off on that note for now is just left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. It obviously wasn't a ruiner for the movie, but um, it was a bit sad. I didn't love that choice.
Sure, I can understand that. especially in the same film series that presented the death of Red Skull for him to disappear for like a decade. I understand seeing it that way.
Yeah.
Um,
That even with that though, you could like he was transported by the space stone.
mhm.
It's like you kind of get that he just like goes away, but like having that present Wanda being like crushed by this giant tower
There
is
is
like
that burst of energy. Did you teleport away? I don't know.
yeah, it like I feel like even a little bit more
Yeah.
nods to that would have been appreciated, or like an end credit scene
Hmm.
of her popping up somewhere. I think would have been great. It would have gone a long way.
Hmm.
I think it's better than the end credit scene we got, but yeah, that was just that's kind of my biggest negative, and it's not that big because like I kind of expect her to come back, and hasn't she re-signed?
Yeah. And like I think it's pretty clear. Like there's not a full resolution, I think, for her as a character, right? Like we get to see her pull herself out of the state she got herself into, but there's still like the bill comes due, like she has to make good on all these things rather than just destroying the book and supposedly dying, like I think there's more to explore with her. So
Yeah, no, I agree.
how do you feel? I'm dying to know this about Dr. Stephen Strange, a character who you've very vocally had mixed feelings on, had high expectations for his own personal story in this film. Where are you at with him now?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'm really glad this was a Doctor Strange movie. Like in terms of this focusing on this obviously focused a lot on Wanda, and I think obviously she outshined um, Doctor Strange in this. But I do appreciate that this wasn't like the cameo fest we were expecting, and I think I really enjoyed his arc throughout this movie. And at one point in the movie, I was like, man, he'd be like a really good like camp counselor. He's real good with these kids.
Yeah.
Um, but I did like the resolution of him going through and helping America and also dealing with Christine and like having that resolution with her character, even though it was across the universe, and just sort of putting that to bed. Um, I appreciated it, and I also liked them dipping into the fact that so many Doctor Stranges throughout the universe are not good or are like corrupted in some way, and it seems like that with this Doctor Strange, like he's learning from those mistakes, from hearing from those people, or from hearing from America or the Illuminati, and he's like trying to be good. So I really appreciated that. I really didn't like the first Doctor Strange movie all that much, or his character arc in that movie.
What character arc?
Yeah, exactly. Like he comes out, uh, he starts out as an arrogant doctor, and he comes out as an arrogant uh, wizard. And in this movie, you can sort of tell the arc from start to finish, which I appreciated. So, yeah, I really like that, and it's one of my favorite parts about this movie, in the fact that it's like, wow, this is a good Doctor Strange movie.
Yeah, as somebody who really loves the character, and ever since his first solo movie, he's like been climbing my top 10 of favorites. Like he's like very easily top 5 now. Um, it was really great to see him within his own film be able to show growth more than what we've seen from his other appearances, right? Where we get a sense that he's embracing the role and responsibilities a bit more, right? With Infinity War and Endgame. But where we start with him here, I think, is a really interesting place to pick up from his first movie, where there's still those threads and Christine and uh, basically who he is as a person. And then by the end, sort of paying off for his role in No Way Home and just the growth that we get to see him go on through this journey made me very happy because he actually did have an arc. And I've seen people say he doesn't have an arc in this movie, which I don't understand. Like,
Yeah, that's odd to me. I feel like it's pretty present.
yeah, and I've also seen like a what feels like a misinterpretation of the theme of the film, where maybe it's just because I say it a lot, but I've seen people be like, "Oh, the theme is Are you happy?" And I don't know how you feel about that, but to me, that just feels like it's a tool they use to get across the point of like hey, you should like look into yourself sometimes and like accept that maybe you don't know everything. That seemed like the point because all three characters had a resolution to that idea rather than like an "Are you happy?" sort of thing.
Yeah, it's probably more of a self-reflective
Hmm.
situation.
Yeah. So I really liked his arc though.
No, I did too. That's something I'm very I was nervous because I didn't like the first Doctor Strange movie, but yeah, this is definitely leagues above it in my opinion. Real quick though, back to Wanda. Did you expect her to be the main villain? Because that was a complete surprise to me.
I'm so glad you asked this because I was going to ask you before we started talking about Strange, but I didn't want to interrupt. Absolutely not. I was so shocked that she was the main villain.
I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people won't like this movie for a lot of reasons in terms of like expectations, like
Hmm.
cameos and whatnot. I'm not sure like how big that will be, but yeah, Wanda was not. I expected her to be a part of the team with whatever they were doing, and then at some point or another become an antagonistic force and have to deal with that.
Hmm.
I did not expect her to be the villain of the movie.
Yeah, like I was ready for Hulk in Avengers 1, basically.
Right. Yes.
But this is like she's just a villain. She's just the antagonist. Um, and I guess I have a, I want to know where you feel about her because we've talked a lot about MCU villains and there's really only a handful of standout ones. And maybe it's just because we know so much more about Wanda and we can understand what's going on in her head, but she at least raised the bar, I think, for MCU villains, and I think she might be my favorite MCU villain.
I'd have to think about it more.
Yeah.
Because I more sympathize with her than like really. Obviously, she's a very threatening force in this movie, but um, like I feel like for her and like someone like Killmonger, where you like really understand
Hmm.
where they're coming from, I feel like even more so with her, um, she's a compelling villain. It's hard to really think of her as a villain though, even though she very much is in this movie. But
Hmm.
it's something I'd have to think about for a little bit.
Yeah, because I think uh, with Thanos, right, like you understand the delusion, and he's talking about numbers and all that stuff. With Killmonger, he's correct. It's just like his actions uh, to some people are very very extreme, and then I don't love the way that they send him out. I think his death scene's really great, but like just the way they handle his ending is for me. And I think Wanda's ending, like we talked about, was handled just incredibly well. So I think maybe she just excels where I think even the best villains aren't the best for me. Because like even Thanos' ending, right? Thanos' ending kind of sucks. I don't know if you feel the same way, but
Um, I I guess I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I guess it's not like as impactful maybe. Because he kind of has two endings, like the end game Thanos
sure,
and
his Infinity War ending is great,
yes,
but the last time we see the character, I think is not.
sure. And he's like kind of a different Thanos at that point, like more
Hmm.
um I don't even know the word for it. Like he's not as like
Bitter? I don't know.
yeah, I think he's the Thanos we see in Infinity War is all more like resigned to the fact that he has to do this, and the
Hmm.
one in we see at the very end of Endgame is um sort of like boyish in a way, and like very much like feeding into his ego of being Thanos and like having all these people at his beck and call. So yeah, I don't love that Thanos. I love the Infinity War Thanos.
Yeah, let me correct myself. That is how I feel about it as well.
Hmm.
So, um, but yeah, really did not see that coming.
No, that was a huge surprise.
How do you feel about America Chavez? Because she is the new player introduced here, played by Sochi Gomez, um, another kid companion for Doctor Strange. But I really liked her. I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, me too. I really liked her as a character. I thought she was a fun presence in this movie. And she had like good banter with Doctor Strange, which is very important. Like he just came off of a Spider-Man movie, which that was a, like Spider-Man always has banter with anyone he's with. So I think she handles that very well. I like her backstory. in terms of like her losing her mothers in that way. I think some people have brought up that it's a little silly that a bee caused that, but like I get it. Like I understood like that was like the any sort of fear like sort of caused that.
Mhm.
And I really like her powers. I think that's super interesting, and the fact that she's the only America Chavez throughout the multiverse is a really cool thread that I'm
Yeah.
interested to see them pick up. And I like the fact that at the end, there's like that glimmer of hope, like, hey, maybe your mothers are still out there. Like, you can still like travel the multiverse and figure that out. So that I feel like will have a very good emotional payoff.
Yeah. The one criticism that I can see and I completely understand is I've seen some people don't like the idea that she kind of just functions as a MacGuffin here with a personality, which I think is fair, um, because we don't really see her go through an arc. We just see her gain confidence because she trusts this Steven, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I did sort of see it coming that like she can't control it. She's just scared because of the first time it happened. Like I had a feeling that was gonna be at least brought up. I didn't think that would be the big moment of resolution for her character. Um, but everything else considered, I do really like her, and I'm excited to see where she shows up again.
No, I agree. Um, yeah, I think that's a like really fascinating power set to have
Mm-hmm.
going forward. That's I'm sure going to be very important in terms of like dealing with the multiverse.
For sure. How did you like how that was represented visually, just with her powers and just the other multiverses we see?
It was cool. I liked the star uh, portal opening.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen a lot of like different portals, I guess, in the MCU, and another one in here with the square. We'll talk about later. But yeah, I thought that was cool. I I think as much as I liked how conservative they were with like the different cameos and multiverses they went through, I think I would have liked to spend a little bit more time in a couple different more universes without maybe like the egregious cameos, but um, like the one we really spent time with was more of a alternate version of obviously it's an alternate version, but like a slightly alternate version of the Earth we know. So it wasn't like crazy different or anything. We only get that like one sequence of them falling through the multiverse with like the X amount of universes we saw. So it really was just the one and two, like the Illuminati verse and the was it the what if Doctor Strange multiverse?
It was not.
Okay, because yeah, people were saying that the what if multiverse or the what if universes are all because they're animated like that is like what the universe looks like because like Doctor Strange like goes through a animated universe in this.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess not.
Yeah, that is another thing I've seen thrown against the movie is like for a movie called Multiverse of Madness, the multiverse wasn't really that mad. Um,
Yeah, like I saw uh, everything everything everywhere all at once recently, which is
mhm.
excellent by the way, and I think that's probably the better. It uses the multiverse in a more interesting way, I think, and it definitely explores a lot more universes. So I think that's probably a reason people are kind of upset with this is it's not as multiversey as people thought it was going to be.
Mhm.
But in a way, I'm kind of glad about that. I
For
was
sure. Yeah, me too.
worried about the cameos, so glad that wasn't the case.
I did see somebody on my Twitter timeline say that Spider Man and Doctor Strange should have swapped subtitles, where it would have been Spider Man in the Multiverse of Madness and Doctor Strange No Way Home, because that is a
Mm,
plot point when they get yeeted to that other multiverse. America's like, I can't get us back. Um, so, yeah, I can understand that, but for me, that was a benefit almost, where it would have been nice to see another one or maybe spend some more time in one of the ones we fall through. But visually, I loved basically everything in the movie. I thought it all looked really great and the way they differentiated multiverses. Um, and I think while it would have been nice, I'm glad I'm wanting more rather than saying we should not have gone to that many, you know?
yes, no, I agree. I agree.
Because this seems like it's the multiverse saga almost. So I'm sure we're going to get more of this stuff in the future, right? We've had technically three projects dealing with this so far, four if you count the hypotheticals in WandaVision. So
Yeah, I'm curious because I was expecting this to sort of pick up where Loki left off in a way,
Hmm.
and I'm kind of getting the feeling now that where we left off with Loki season 1 is only really going to be picked up in Loki season 2. And I know Kevin Feige has said recently that everything has happened recently because of what happened at the end of Loki, but they haven't like visually or like through the plot of any of the MCU projects we've seen so far described that. So like since we haven't seen that on screen, I haven't really I don't really quite believe that until they actually say it. So it's kind of strange we're at the point after the huge drop of Loki that we haven't necessarily dealt with that. The ramifications of like the multiverse opening up like that.
Yeah, which I think you're right. I think Loki is going to be leading towards more so Ant-Man because there was, remember the theory that the TVA was in the quantum realm?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, especially if we set up Kang and Loki, and Kang is supposed to be in Quantumania. So like, I'm still on that side that I don't think Kang is the end point of this phase, but I think you're right. Loki's probably gonna have a lot more to play with Ant-Man than anything else.
Sure.
Uh, but another thing, just you talking about like connections and sort of the way like we're looking for some answers. I really do appreciate that with how much there is going on in Multiverse of Madness, they don't constantly feel like they have to explain or catch people up, right? Which I could see as a detriment, but as a piece of the MCU, I'm glad they're like, most of you know what's happening. We don't have to explain all these things, you know?
No, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in this. Like you mentioned, America as the MacGuffin. There's like 1,000 MacGuffins in this.
Mhm.
Like there's the Book of Ashanti, and then there's the Darkhold, and there's just so much going on in terms of like objects that have power that they need to use. Um, but it feels fairly understandable. Like there's nothing. There's some rules that I don't quite understand, like why. Well, no, I was gonna say like why wasn't Strange corrupted by the Darkhold? I guess he was by the end of the movie, but then the end credit scene seems like he has more control than Wanda does. I'm a little there. There were parts of the
So
movie that felt like inconsistent in that way, but
I think with the Darkhold thing, it's like, I don't know if it's a corruption as much as like it's a temptation, right? Where I think Wanda was like, at the end of WandaVision, her only goal was, I need to see my children again. And the Darkhold had that answer for her. And that's a goal, like that's a goal she has to keep working towards. Strange was like, I gotta get home or figure out a way to communicate with home. And once he did that, like his goal was achieved through the use of that. So I think the fact that we're having those two points of views on it is maybe that it's not super clear what the
yeah,
Darkhold's.
that's kind of where I'm at. It seems a little unclear at this point.
Yeah. Um, but I do think in like the repercussions of WandaVision and Spider-Man No Way Home for Wanda and Steven, and even Infinity War and Endgame, like I think they don't waste time catching people up on that stuff. And I also think that someone could still enjoy what this movie has to offer without having seen everything. I think it's still like a very entertaining, fun ride, like you said at the top.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, I think I have another question for you about the Illuminati.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that John Krasinski, which also that happened, so like
Yeah.
that's cool.
Let's maybe we'll introduce that before getting
Sure.
into it.
Let's just talk in general about the Illuminati because really didn't touch on it that much outside of how they all got murdered.
Yeah.
Um, it was Black Bolt, played by Anson Mount, who played Black Bolt in the Inhumans TV show that got canceled.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
I can't believe they did that.
And at that point, dude, I'll give it to the Shield fans. Agents of Shield is probably canon in some way. All right, congratulations.
Yeah. Well, like you would assume that would be, but maybe like in some sort of alternate universe. Who knows? But
Mhm.
it was insane that they had an Inhumans guy on the Illuminati. Like that was really funny.
Yes, that was nuts. We also got Peggy Carter as Captain Carter.
Hmm. Should not have showed that in the trailers. Like
Yeah,
that
dude.
that is something I saw a week before, and that was weird. Like they should not have shown that at all, or
Yeah,
anyone from the Illuminati for that matter.
they shouldn't have. I understand maybe why they started with Professor X because it was like everything that leaked for No Way Home. Like we might as well rip the Band-Aid off now because they did save the big surprise, right?
Hmm.
Um, so obviously Professor X, Maria Rambeau as Captain Marvel, and Mordo from this universe, and of course Reed Richards, John Krasinski. Did you hear it pop off?
Yeah, that was the one. I'm really surprised they kept that secret, and it's not one that I really saw coming.
Mm-hmm.
And I messaged you after. I'm like, wow, this is like kind of one of the only, in terms of the MCU, I think this might be the one like fan casting that actually came true, unless I'm misremembering something. But that was a great surprise, and it was kind of amazing to see him actually in the role that everyone has envisioned him being.
Yeah, it looked exactly like that fan art,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
like to a T. Even the suit being like this weird combination of blue and black.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so a lot of people are taking this as confirmed confirmation that he's Reed Richards for 616, our universe. I'm not there just yet because we've seen with No Way Home that other actors can play the same character from a different reality. Patrick Stewart, I highly, highly doubt. I would even say he's not going to be a Professor X. Is there a world where they needed Reed Richards in this film? They were like, we'll throw a bone to the fans because they always have wanted this thing to be a thing. But when we introduce the Fantastic Four, it's going to have more fanfare and it's going to be someone like Glenn Howerton. It's like our actual Reed Richards. But this was a fun nod for the fans. Do you think that there's a chance that that's what happened here?
I think there's like a 70% chance that John Krasinski will return. Like
Yes.
I'm more confident that he will be back in the role. But yeah, you're right. There are a thousand things pointing to the fact that anyone can be played by any actor throughout the multiverse. Um, but also at the same time, like with the Illuminati, we had um, like Peggy Carter was played by Haley Atwell,
Mm-hmm.
who she plays in 616, and Patrick Stewart played Professor X, and we knew him from the Fox universe, and Mordo was played by the Mordo actor. Like everyone in the Illuminati was played by the same actors that play those roles throughout the 616 universe. So I feel like that maybe points to a consistency with Reed Richards appearing as, or John Krasinski coming back for Reed Richards, but it's entirely possible that it's someone else. But I'm a little more confident that he's coming back.
Sure. Like, you don't think Patrick Stewart's going to be our Professor X, though, right?
Um, Probably not, just because he's probably done with that character
Mm-hmm.
at this point. But honestly, who's to say? I'm not even sure like how they're going to introduce the X-Men and how like we could be dealing with a younger Charles Xavier. Like I'm not really even sure.
Yeah, I have an idea of where we could be going with that we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's likely that John Krasinski is going to come in and be Reed and probably direct the film as well now that he has an opening as a director because John Watts left. But yeah, that was a cool use of those characters. Who was your favorite death?
I thought the Black Bolt death
Fuck
was
yeah.
horrifying,
Yeah,
and
dude.
I honestly thought the Reed Richards death was equally as horrifying. Like unraveling and
Mm-hmm.
then just popping at the end was fantastic. And then honestly, seeing Peggy Carter's death was crazy. Like her being cut in half.
Yeah, man. I forgot to lead with this. I saw it at 4 on a Thursday, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was me, 4 friends. There was like a group of like 3 behind us. There was maybe another group of 4 in a different place in the theater, and then front row there were parents and like 2 toddlers at this movie. And yeah, they're probably scarred for life with some of this stuff. The Black Bolt death was I got a reaction out of that one. That was gnarly. Loved it.
Yeah, that was definitely the take. And for them to lead off like that,
Yeah.
fantastic.
4. Um, was there anything major from the film aside from the ending and post credit stuff that we haven't touched on? Like the other Doctor Stranges, we danced around a little bit. From what I'm aware, they're referring to the one who you thought was the What If Strange as evil Doctor Strange,
Mm-hmm.
not Doctor Strange Supreme, who by the end of What If was kind of redeemed. Um, so that reality had an incursion that happened. Like that was the result of that reality, right?
Yeah.
So I have a theory that I got the vibe in that scene that that was our Doctor Strange, just like super far gone, uh, down at like a path of like worst case scenario. And I think at the very end, when we see the third eye open, we're obviously meant to think of that like evil Doctor Strange. So, and then the post credit scene happens where we learn that an incursion happened because of our Doctor Strange. So I'm wondering if like it is us down the line, but the events and the ending of this movie maybe caused a diversion to make that ending avoidable.
Mm,
How do you feel about that?
that's interesting. I didn't really consider that. I just sort of thought it was that Doctor Strange using the Darkhold.
Mm-hmm.
But that's fairly interesting. Like this is the reality where our Doctor Strange takes a different path.
Yeah, because if you look at that incursion universe, right? Like obviously it looks trippy because an incursion happened, but the identifiable things look very similar to ours. Like I think those street signs were in English. Uh, the buildings looked normal. Just the way the two talk to each other about their own like shortcomings as people and
Oh, the
Christine,
sister.
the sister, like it seemed a bit too in sync for me
Mm,
compared to the other strangers that I was like,
sure.
I think they might be doing something here.
That's interesting. I know a lot of people have speculated that Dormammu is a Doctor Strange variant.
That'd be cool.
So I don't know if that one charts with that, but I really did like the music scene
Yeah,
in
dude.
that part. It was like really interesting use of magic, like Doctor Strange like on his feet seeing a music page and ripping that out and using those as spells. Really cool. I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, man, I love that. I'm seeing so much hate for that. I thought that was one of the coolest things they've done recently.
No, I thought that was very interesting, like almost like Fantasia like in a way, like old school Disney. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, because like if you're a magician and you got whimsical abilities, be whimsical. You know,
Yeah,
like you don't have to make an orange sword every time you want to do something.
yeah, like you're right. There's so many different like boring ways that they've used magic before in terms of, yeah, like the whip or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to conjure up like actual notes of music and use them as weapons is really cool.
Definitely. Uh, is there anything we haven't touched on aside from post credits that you want to bring up?
Nothing like I could really talk to all that much. Like Wong was cool. He's
Mm-hmm.
always fun.
I'm glad he stayed Sorcerer Supreme.
I agree. I'm in agreement with you.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't think there's really all too much else that we haven't gone over that's really worth talking about too much.
Yeah, the last thing on my mind was Wong. Because yeah, everything else I just really enjoyed. Tone, the cheesiness, all of it. But the post credit scene and the very, very end of the film, I guess, because it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
tied together. Uh, the very end was kind of jarring to me. I don't know how you feel.
Well, I actually didn't like the combination of the very end of him like getting the third eye and the end credit scene where he's just like casually walking down the street because it feels like they shot that exactly at the same time.
Yeah.
And it was very, like what you said, jarring to go from, oh, this is ending like in a very horror-esque way, to the end credit scene immediately being like, no, it's fine. That didn't really square right with me. It felt very inconsistent with the actual end of the movie
Mm-hmm.
for him to just be like, "Yep, I got a third eye now. I'm using it to my benefit." And I don't know, that was at odds for me.
Yeah, because at first my initial gut thing was like, oh, did evil Doctor Strange replace our Doctor Strange at some point, and he was masquerading, and now it's actually him? Because that
Hmm.
was like, obviously they want us to think of that guy, right, with the third eye thing.
Yeah.
And then the post credit scene is like, oh no, it's not. It's fine. It's ours. It's our Strange. So it was like, oh, okay. Then why did it end like that? Like, what's the reveal there? Like, I get yes, if they're like what?
Yeah, they like literally don't even let you sit for 5 minutes. Like after the mid credits, you are instantly put back,
Mm-hmm.
and he's just like casually walking down the street. It was weird. It's one of my least favorite end credit scenes.
Yeah. What happens in it though is we're introduced to Clea, played by Charlize Theron, who I did not expect to see in this film when I sat down.
No,
uh, have you done any research on her?
I've heard she's like the niece of Dormammu. Is that right?
Niece of Dormammu, Sorcerer Supreme of the Dark Dimension, and eventually Doctor Strange's wife.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, that's something I want to see because she mentions like, "Hey, there, you caused an incursion. We got to go deal with it." And she seemingly opens like a portal to the dark dimension, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So that, at least in that regard, that's interesting. But it felt very strange to me. I did not like picking up immediately after the movie with that. It felt odd.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It was very, very odd. Um, I don't know if that's teasing an eventual like build up to the big finale of this phase or like Doctor Strange 3 or what, but um, very on board with anything else with this character in the future. I hope Sam Raimi returns because I really loved his take on Doctor Strange. Um, but yeah, and then the final post credit scene, Bruce
Yeah, it
Campbell.
was fun. Love that one. I love the good funny end credit scene, where he literally just gets to say it's over to the
Yeah,
audience. That was
yeah,
fun. That was cool.
yeah. I've seen a lot of people pissed off. Like, just enjoy it. It was fun, you
Yeah,
know.
it's like the homecoming end credit scene where Captain America's
Hmm.
like literally talking to the audience, being like, "Oh, you're disappointed now." It's cool. I like those. That's fun.
I
It's like we go in with the expectation that we're gonna get a silly one and we're gonna get a world building one.
Yeah, and I think maybe the reason people are upset at this one is maybe because they don't know who Bruce Campbell is. Maybe, and Captain America was
Yeah,
like, "Oh, that's a fun Cap bit,"
sure.
but yeah, I loved that. That was great to see him in there.
Yeah.
So, as we wrap up, rankings, ratings, whatever you want to say, final words on it, thoughts for the future. Let's hear it.
Yeah, my immediate reaction coming out of this movie was that was really fun. Like, what a blast of a movie it was. Again, I mentioned it, but it was like definitely a palate cleanser coming off of Moon Knight, like the same week. This feeling like so fresh, and in a lot of ways, in my opinion, I think Moon Knight is kind of there are some unique elements to it, but it falls fairly standard for me in terms of the MCU. And um, Phase 4 is definitely one of those hit or miss phases for me so far. Moon Knight's kind of in the middle, but then there's some like lower movies like Eternals and Black Widow that are and Hawkeye that are pretty low on the list. But for me, but Doctor Strange and Multiverse Madness is my new number 10 in my rankings. I didn't expect it to be that high. I thought it was kind of going to be in the middle of my list, but it's a movie that's very unique, and I really enjoy it. And I could see it maybe climbing at some point or another up one or two spots, but right now that's where it's at. And yeah, I had a blast with this movie. What about you?
Yeah, I loved it. Like I said, it has hampered enjoyment of other MCU projects, I think, with just how bold it is for this franchise. Love the character, was a great ride. Love the villain a lot, and I think it raises the bar in a handful of ways, as we've talked about. So for me, it is quite high. Um, so my top five are Winter Soldier, Shang Chi, then Multiverse of Madness, then Guardians 1 and 2. Um, yeah, I absolutely loved it, and we'll see it many, many more times. And I think it's going to be a very rewatchable movie, which I think is good because of how speedy it is, how streamlined it is, and just how entertaining it is. So,
Yeah, you and I both have Doctor Strange and Shang Chi very close to each other,
mhm.
and I feel like they're similar in that regard, in terms of like being kind of unique to the MCU, doing something different. Um, so yeah, it's a great movie. I really want to see it again.
Yeah, me too. I'm very much looking forward to seeing it again. And I think it's fun like seeing those two next to each other because they're both phase four projects, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, where I think multiverse hopefully is the beginning of embracing that really strong differentiator between projects. And Shang-Chi, I think, is just their best origin story. So, yeah, what a movie.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, that is it for this week's Excelsior. So, Jack, where can the agents of Excelsior find you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Fascinated Jack. What about you, Christian?
You can find me on Twitter and TikTok at Shun2D2. YouTube.com/JoyClicks is where you can find the video version of Excelsior posting every week. If you want to check it out on audio services, you can do so by going to your favorite platform like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, anywhere you listen to podcasts. Look up Excelsior, Marvel's Avengers Podcast, JoyClicks. You'll find it. The show is at ExcelsiorJC on Twitter. And yeah, rating and reviewing the show on your platform of choice is appreciated. It helps us out a ton. And if you want to help us out further, patreon.com/joyclicks is where you can go to support the shows. The $1 and $5 tiers, $5 will give you producer credit on every show we produce, like Aaron Easton and Jose Garcia. So thank you very much. And that is it for Excelsior. We'll be back normally for the normal episode in the coming week off, then back to Formula. So
Back to formula.
until then, Excelsior.